Open this safe and $250 million is yours. The billionaire mocked, never imagining the black janitor's son would crack it in 25 seconds. Genius doesn't arrive with credentials and corner offices. Sometimes it shows up in a red hoodie, doing calculus homework, waiting for someone, anyone, to finally see it. And sometimes one moment of brilliance can shatter decades of contempt. Before we dive back in, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we've got something powerful lined up for you. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now, let's continue. The executive conference room at Ashford Tower reeked of designer cologne and 7 days of desperation. The gleaming space, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and imported Italian marble, had witnessed countless power plays over the years. Million-dollar acquisitions sealed with handshakes. Careers destroyed with a single vote. The quiet rage of employees dismissed as expendable. But nothing like this. 7 days of failure. 7 days of watching the most elite security specialists in the world try and fail to crack a safe that had become a $450,000 prison. 7 days of watching Thornton Ashford's carefully constructed empire threaten to collapse because the technology he'd trusted had betrayed him. It was 4:17 p.m. when everything changed. Ashford stood at the center of the conference room, surrounded by the wreckage of his arrogance. 15 witnesses formed a circle around him. Board members in custom-tailored suits who'd flown in from 3 continents. Lawyers with briefcases full of lawsuits, and security specialists whose reputations were built on solving impossible problems. The quantum-encrypted safe towered behind them all, its brushed steel surface catching the late afternoon light, its digital keypad dark and dead. This was supposed to be his fortress, his impenetrable protection against a world that wanted to take what was his. Now it mocked him with its silence, holding hostage the only physical copies of cryptocurrency keys worth $600 million in documents that could either save his crumbling empire or destroy it completely. In desperation, fueled by top-shelf whiskey and the panic of watching his acquisition deal collapse, Ashford made an offer that would be his undoing. $250 million, he announced, his voice slurred but loud enough for everyone to hear. To anyone who can crack this safe. The technicians stopped packing their equipment, stunned. His lead attorney immediately began documenting the statement on company letterhead. But against the back wall, barely visible among his father's cleaning supplies and forgotten by everyone in that room of powerful people, sat 12-year-old Isaiah Fletcher. Small for his age, wearing his bright red hoodie and blue backpack, advanced calculus textbook open across his lap. The son of Terrence Fletcher, the night janitor who'd cleaned Ashford Tower's 40 floors for 8 years. The boy Ashford had publicly humiliated with racist comments since the day Terrence first brought him to work during spring break. Isaiah knew how to open the safe. He'd found the technical specifications 3 weeks ago while taking out Ashford's recycling. Complete manufacturer documentation that the billionaire had carelessly discarded, assuming the help couldn't possibly understand quantum encryption theory or mechanical engineering. For 47 hours straight, Isaiah had taught himself the mathematical vulnerabilities in the backup mechanical override system. He practiced the sequence on a cardboard model until he could execute it in 25 seconds. But Isaiah had learned to be invisible. Ashford had taught him that with every slur, every dismissive gesture, every cruel comment about people like you and knowing your place. Until this moment. "Excuse me, Mr. Ashford," Isaiah said softly, his voice cutting through the murmurs of conversation. "I can open it." The room froze. Every head turned toward the black child in the red hoodie, sitting in the corner where he wasn't supposed to exist. Ashford's face cycled through shock, recognition, and something far darker. That look Isaiah knew too well. The look that said he didn't belong here, that he had no right to even speak in this space, that his voice was an intrusion on a conversation meant for people who mattered. But before we see what happens when Isaiah stands up and walks toward that safe, you need to understand how he got here. You need to know who Thornton Ashford really is, beyond the tech mogul image and the philanthropy awards. You need to know who Isaiah and his father Terrence are. and what led to this impossible electric moment. Because this isn't just a story about a locked safe. This is a story about years of silent suffering, about racism disguised as corporate culture and just business, about a child learning to become invisible while his extraordinary mind cataloged everything, every pattern, every vulnerability, every moment of contempt, about genius trapped in poverty and brilliance dismissed because it didn't arrive in the right packaging. Let me take you back to when this safe was first installed. Back to when Terrence first brought his son to work during spring break, desperate for childcare he couldn't afford. Back to the building hatred and quiet brilliance that would collide in 25 seconds and change everything. This is how it all began. 8 months earlier, Thornton Ashford had always been obsessed with control. At 52 years old, successful but perpetually suspicious, he'd built his $3.2 billion tech empire on the principle that trust was a luxury only fools could afford. Ashford Tower dominated the city skyline. 40 floors of steel and glass, housing 2,400 employees who worked under his exacting standards and ruthless efficiency protocols. Inside the executive conference room on the 40th floor, polished marble reflected the glow of recessed lighting. Every piece of furniture had been imported from Italy. Every piece of technology was cutting edge. Every security measure was state-of-the-art. But it wasn't enough. "I don't trust anyone," Ashford told the 3 German security specialists sitting across from him at the conference table. "Not my executives, not my board members, not the people who empty my trash." The specialists exchanged glances. They'd flown in from Munich specifically for this consultation, bringing detailed proposals for their most sophisticated safe systems. Each model they presented incorporated the latest advances: quantum encryption, biometric authentication, military-grade construction. Ashford rejected them all. "Too standard," he said, waving dismissively. "If you can manufacture 100 of them, someone can crack one of them. I want something unprecedented, one of a kind. No blueprints retained, no duplicates made, no bypass codes, no manufacturer override. Nothing." The lead specialist, a precise engineer with steel-rimmed glasses, leaned forward. "Mr. Ashford, what you're describing would be extraordinarily expensive. And if the biometric system malfunctions, there would be no backup access." "I'll have the mechanical override," Ashford interrupted. "I need a safe that's completely impenetrable. Something designed so that corporate spies, hackers, even federal agents with warrants can't access what's inside. Can you build it or not?" The specialist paused, calculating. Then he nodded slowly. "We can. But understand, there will be zero backup from us. If something goes wrong with the electronics, only the mechanical system remains." Ashford smiled. "Perfect." 4 months and $450,000 later, the safe arrived. Ashford stood in the executive conference room at 6 a.m., watching through floor-to-ceiling windows as a specialized cargo helicopter descended toward the building's rooftop helipad. Below, the city was still dark, office towers lit like scattered constellations against the pre-dawn sky. Up here, 40 floors above the streets, Ashford felt like a god surveying his kingdom. The safe had been transported from Munich in 3 separate shipments for security reasons. The outer casing in one container, the quantum encryption module in another, the biometric system in a third. Even the German technicians didn't know the full specifications. Each team had worked on isolated components, then destroyed their blueprints per Ashford's contract. "Mr. Ashford," his assistant called from the doorway, tablet in hand. "The installation crew is ready." "Good," Ashford said, not turning from the window. "No one enters this room except the technicians and me. Clear my calendar for the next 12 hours. By 7 a.m., the safe dominated the conference room's vault, a reinforced concrete chamber built into the building's core. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, constructed from layered steel alloy that could withstand explosives, plasma cutters, and sustained assault. The surface was brushed titanium, catching light like liquid metal. At its center, a biometric scanner glowed faintly blue, and below that, a mechanical dial and digital keypad. The lead technician, a stern woman named Dr. Klaus, supervised as her team bolted the safe to the reinforced floor using titanium anchors that went 6 feet deep. The quantum encryption system is revolutionary, she explained, her accent precise. It uses entangled photons to generate truly random encryption keys. No computer, classical or quantum, can predict the pattern. And the biometric locks? Ashford asked, studying every detail. Military grade, Dr. Klaus replied. Retinal scan, fingerprint, and voice recognition, all three required simultaneously. But Mr. Ashford, I must emphasize the mechanical backup system. I know, Ashford interrupted. You've explained it 3 times. Dr. Klaus's expression remained professional, but Ashford caught the flicker of annoyance. Then you understand that power surges can corrupt electronic components. The quantum system is extraordinarily sophisticated, which also makes it potentially vulnerable to electrical interference. That's why we've installed the mechanical override, a completely analog system separate from all electronics. My building has redundant power systems, Ashford said dismissively. Backup generators, surge protectors, uninterruptible power supplies. We've never had a significant power failure. Nevertheless, Dr. Klaus persisted, if the biometric system ever malfunctions, the mechanical override is your only access. The specifications are in this documentation. She handed him a thick folder stamped with security warnings in 3 languages. Ashford took the folder and tossed it onto the conference table without opening it. I won't need it. The installation took 12 hours. Ashford remained the entire time, watching technicians run diagnostic tests, calibrate sensors, and program encryption protocols. He ate lunch at the conference table, sushi delivered from his favorite restaurant, while Dr. Klaus's team worked with precision instruments and laptop computers displaying cascading code. Through the glass walls separating the conference room from the main executive floor, Ashford observed his empire in motion. Executives hurried past with portfolios and urgent expressions. His assistant fielded phone calls at her desk. In the elevator bank, employees swiped badges and avoided eye contact with anyone above their pay grade. And there, near the service elevator, Ashford noticed the evening cleaning crew arriving early for shift change. A black man in his early 40s pushed a cleaning cart loaded with supplies, spray bottles, microfiber cloths, industrial vacuum cleaner. He moved with practiced efficiency, the kind of invisible competence Ashford expected from service workers. The man's uniform was clean but worn, his movements economical, his eyes never straying toward the executive offices where he didn't belong. Ashford didn't know his name. Didn't need to. The cleaning crew was managed by a facilities contractor. Ashford paid a monthly invoice and expected spotless floors. Individual workers were as interchangeable as light bulbs. The man disappeared toward the service areas, cartwheels squeaking faintly, and Ashford turned his attention back to more important matters. By 6:30 p.m., the installation was complete. We're ready for the final test, Dr. Klaus announced. Please approach the biometric scanner. Ashford stepped up to the safe. The blue scanner light intensified as he leaned close. A laser grid mapped his retina while the fingerprint pad read his right thumb and the voice recognition system activated. State your full name, Dr. Klaus instructed. Thornton James Ashford, he said clearly. Multiple locks disengaged with synchronized precision. Heavy metallic sounds that resonated with finality. The massive door unsealed with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the vault interior. Climate-controlled, lined with felt, equipped with adjustable shelving. Perfect. The safe is now exclusively keyed to your biometric signature, Dr. Klaus said. No one else can open it using the electronic system. For the mechanical override, you'll need to follow the protocols in the documentation. Understood, Ashford said, though he'd already dismissed the concern. After the technicians left, escorted out by security and required to sign additional non-disclosure agreements, Ashford stood alone in the conference room with his fortress. He returned to his private office and retrieved what would go inside. USB drives containing encryption keys for cryptocurrency wallets worth $600 million. Bearer bonds in denominations large enough to make most people's hands shake. documents proving his insider trading network, carefully constructed over 8 years, involving 340 investors and 16 corporate acquisitions. Evidence of bribed federal officials whose cooperation had saved him from 3 regulatory investigations. Offshore account access codes for holdings in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore. Money hidden from tax authorities, ex-wives, and business partners. And the corporate espionage files. Stolen intellectual property from competitors. Trade secrets acquired through hired hackers. Confidential information that certain regulatory agencies would find very interesting. Everything that represented his power, his wealth, and his criminal genius went into that safe. As Ashford carefully arranged his empire's darkest secrets on the felt-lined shelves, he felt something close to religious satisfaction. This was it, the perfect protection. No one could touch him now. Not his business rivals who'd love to see him fall. Not the federal investigators who'd been circling his company for years. Not the board members who questioned his methods. And certainly not the parade of invisible workers who moved through his building like shadows, cleaning his floors and emptying his trash. Ashford closed the massive door and activated the locks. He tested the biometric system 3 more times. Each test perfect, each unsealing as smooth as precision machinery should be. Finally, at 8:47 p.m., alone in his conference room with his $450,000 fortress gleaming under recessed lighting, Ashford poured himself a whiskey from the bar cart. Through the windows, the city sparkled below him. Millions of people living their small lives, never knowing that 40 floors above them sat a man who'd beaten them all. He was untouchable, or so he thought. What Ashford didn't know, couldn't have predicted in his arrogance, was that 8 months later his perfect fortress would become his perfect prison, that his paranoia would trap him as effectively as it was meant to trap others, that the carelessly discarded technical documentation, tossed into recycling because he assumed the help couldn't possibly understand quantum encryption theory, would end up in the hands of someone with an extraordinary gift. And that the invisible man he'd noticed pushing a cleaning cart, the one whose name he'd never bothered to learn, had a 12-year-old son with a photographic memory and mathematical genius that could crack systems Ashford believed unbreakable. But that revelation was still 8 months away. For now, Ashford stood in his conference room, whiskey in hand, admiring his fortress of steel and quantum encryption, completely unaware that empires built on arrogance and contempt have a way of crumbling from within. That the people you dismiss as invisible are always watching, always learning. And when their moment comes, they don't just prove you wrong. They destroy you completely. The alarm went off at 4:45 a.m., the same as it had every morning for the past 8 years. Terrence Fletcher silenced it before the second beep, his hand moving automatically in the darkness of his bedroom. He lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet breathing from the adjacent room where Isaiah slept. Outside their modest 2-bedroom apartment, the city was still dark, street lights casting orange halos through the gaps in the blinds. He rose without turning on lights, moving through a routine his body knew by heart. Shower, shave, uniform. The navy blue work shirt and pants hung on the back of the bathroom door, freshly washed but permanently marked by 8 years of bleach stains and wear. His name was embroidered above the pocket. T. Fletcher, Facilities Services. In the kitchen, Terrence made coffee in the 4-cup maker that had belonged to his wife. Rachel, 3 years gone now, stolen by cancer they caught too late because they couldn't afford the insurance that covered proper screenings. The medical bills had taken everything. Their savings, their car, nearly their apartment. Now it was just him and Isaiah, surviving. Terrence worked 5 nights a week at Ashford Tower, 7 p.m. to 5 a.m., with mandatory availability for weekends and holidays. The pay was $16.50 an hour, enough to cover rent, food, utilities, and not much else. No benefits, no sick days, no path to anything better. Just 40 hours a week of mopping floors, emptying trash, and remaining invisible to people who earned more in a day than he made in a year. But it was steady work. And in their neighborhood, steady work was survival. At 5:15 a.m., Isaiah emerged from his bedroom, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Small for his 12 years, wearing an oversized t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair still pressed flat on one side from his pillow. "Morning, Dad," Isaiah said quietly, sliding into one of the two chairs at their small kitchen table. "Morning, son," Terrence replied, pouring orange juice into a glass. "You sleep okay?" Isaiah nodded, pulling a library book toward him, something thick with equations on the cover. Even at 5:15 in the morning, his mind was already working, eyes scanning pages with that intense focus Terrence had learned to recognize. Isaiah's teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, had sent home another note last week. Terrence kept it folded in his wallet, the words both filling him with pride and breaking his heart. "Mr. Fletcher, I need you to understand that Isaiah is exceptional. He solves complex equations in his head that most high school students need calculators for. He remembers everything he reads, complete photographic recall. He's teaching himself advanced calculus and physics from library books because our school doesn't offer courses at his level. This is the kind of gift that could take him anywhere. But he needs resources we simply don't have. Please consider applying for the gifted program at the charter school downtown." Terrence had researched the charter school. Application fees, mandatory parent participation hours, supplies, and equipment costs. All the things that schools for poor kids never required. All the things families like theirs couldn't afford. Genius without resources or connections was just potential trapped in poverty. "Dad," Isaiah's voice pulled him back to the present. "Yes, son." "Spring break starts Monday," Isaiah said, not looking up from his book. "School's closed for 3 weeks for renovations." Terrence's heart sank. He'd forgotten. The after-school program Isaiah usually attended was in the same building, also closed. Terrence had no family nearby, no friends with flexible enough schedules to help. Babysitters cost money he didn't have. "You'll come to work with me," Terrence said, making the decision out loud. "Just for the 3 weeks." Isaiah looked up, eyes bright with something that might have been excitement if Terrence didn't know his son better. It was curiosity. Isaiah's mind treated new environments like puzzles to solve. "You have to promise me something," Terrence said firmly. "Stay quiet, stay small, stay invisible. Bring your homework, your books, don't touch anything, don't talk to anyone unless they talk to you first. Understand?" "Yes, sir," Isaiah replied. "I mean it." "Isaiah," Terrence continued, his voice harder than he intended. "These people, they don't see us as human. We're furniture to them, part of the building. That's how we survive. You be the smartest, quietest furniture they've ever seen." Isaiah nodded, but Terrence saw something flicker across his son's face, understanding that cut deeper than any 12-year-old should have to carry. The first week of spring break, Isaiah learned what his father had meant. Ashford Tower was a world unlike anything he'd experienced. 40 floors of steel and glass, marble lobbies, executive offices with furniture that cost more than 3 months of his father's salary. Security cameras everywhere, badge control doors, surveillance that tracked movement through every corridor. Isaiah sat in the janitor's break room on the service level, a windowless space with a folding table, 3 plastic chairs, a microwave that barely worked, and a water cooler. He spread his homework across the table. Calculus problems from a college textbook Mr. Rodriguez had borrowed for him from the community college library. At 9:47 p.m. on his third night, the door opened. Thornton Ashford walked in, mid-conversation on his phone, heading for the small refrigerator where bottles of imported water were kept for executive use. He stopped when he saw Isaiah. Isaiah froze, textbook open in front of him, pencil in hand, feeling every word his father had said about staying invisible. Ashford stared at him for 3 long seconds. Then, still holding his phone, he stepped out into the corridor where his assistant waited. But Isaiah heard every word through the partially open door. "Now we're running a daycare for the help." Ashford's voice was loud enough to carry. "What's next?" "Teaching them to use the executive washroom. Someone needs to remind these people about boundaries." The assistant murmured something Isaiah couldn't hear. "I don't care whose kid it is," Ashford continued. "This is a professional environment. We're not a babysitting service." Isaiah kept his eyes on his textbook, but his hands trembled. He'd done exactly what his father had said. Stayed quiet, stayed small, stayed invisible. But it hadn't mattered. When Terrence found him 20 minutes later, Isaiah's face was carefully neutral. "What happened?" Terrence asked, reading his son the way only parents can. "Nothing," Isaiah said, but they both knew it was a lie. Over the following 2 weeks, the comments escalated. When Isaiah carried his father's cleaning supplies from one floor to another. "Watch your wallets around that one. You know how they are." When Isaiah read in the corner of an executive floor while his father vacuumed, "Someone should teach these kids to aim lower, not fill their heads with ideas." You know what happens when people try to be something they're not? Disappointment. When Isaiah accidentally made eye contact with Ashford in a hallway, "Eyes down, kid." Nobody wants to see that attitude. Isaiah learned to become invisible, to fold himself into corners, to move like shadow, to erase himself from rooms where he was unwanted. But his photographic memory recorded everything. Every slur, every dismissive gesture, every moment of casual cruelty. His mind captured them with perfect clarity and stored them permanently. One night, after a particularly vicious comment about janitor genetics, Terrence found Isaiah crying silently in a stairwell. "Why does he hate us?" Isaiah asked, his voice small and broken. Terrence sat beside his son on the cold concrete steps. "Some people just have hate in their hearts," he said quietly. "But we need this job. We need the money for rent, for food, for your school supplies. So we smile, we stay quiet, and we survive. You understand?" Isaiah nodded against his father's shoulder. He understood more than he wanted to. But while Isaiah learned to be invisible, something else was happening. His extraordinary mind was working. As his father cleaned, Isaiah explored with his eyes. He noticed patterns, security guard rotations, badge access levels, surveillance camera blind spots. He observed building layouts, emergency exits, maintenance protocols. He watched people move through spaces as if the help didn't exist, speaking freely about confidential matters because janitors and their sons were just furniture. His brain cataloged everything automatically. Security codes glimpsed over shoulders. Conversations overheard about encrypted systems and quantum technology. Technical specifications left on conference room tables. Isaiah wasn't just surviving his time at Ashford Tower. He was learning. And when someone with a photographic memory and mathematical genius learns in an environment where they're treated as invisible, they see things that powerful people never intended anyone to see. Things that in just a few weeks would bring a billion-dollar empire crashing down. It happened on a Thursday night, 3 weeks into spring break. Isaiah was emptying recycling bins on the 40th floor, working his way through the executive conference room while his father cleaned the adjacent offices. The conference room still smelled faintly of expensive cologne and the imported bottled water that only executives were allowed to drink. Isaiah wheeled the recycling cart toward the large blue bin beside the conference table, mechanically sorting paper from plastic the way his father had taught him. Most of it was standard corporate waste, printed emails, meeting agendas, financial reports with numbers that made his head spin. Then he saw the folder. Thick, official-looking, stamped with security warnings in 3 languages. Someone had tossed it carelessly into the recycling bin, pages spilling out. Isaiah's photographic memory recognized the logo immediately. The same German security company whose technicians he'd watched installing the massive safe months ago. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled the folder free. Quantum Secure GmbH, technical specifications and override protocols, confidential. Isaiah glanced toward the doorway where his father worked, then opened the folder. What he found inside would change everything. Complete manufacturer documentation for the quantum-encrypted safe. Detailed schematics showing the biometric system architecture. Diagrams of the mechanical backup override system with precise measurements, gear ratios, and torque specifications. Mathematical formulas describing the quantum encryption algorithms. Lattice-based cryptography that even most security experts couldn't fully understand. And handwritten notes in the margins. In Ashford's distinctive aggressive scrawl. Overkill. Don't need backup. Perfect biometric system. Isaiah's mind began working at a speed that would have frightened most people. His photographic memory absorbed page after page, circuit diagrams, mechanical engineering specifications, quantum cryptography protocols. Information that Ashford had thrown away because he assumed the help couldn't possibly understand complex security engineering. He was wrong. Isaiah carefully placed the folder at the bottom of his cart, covered it with other recycling, and finished his work with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. That night, after his father fell asleep, Isaiah spread the documents across their small kitchen table. For the next 47 hours, he barely slept. He started with the quantum encryption system, teaching himself from the technical specifications and filling in gaps with research at the public library's computers. The safe used lattice-based cryptography, mathematical problems so complex that even quantum computers would need millions of years to crack them. NIST-approved algorithms, military-grade security, encryption that was essentially unbreakable. But the quantum system required power. Isaiah traced his finger along the circuit diagrams, his mind calculating faster than most people could read. The biometric locks, retinal scan, fingerprint, voice recognition, all depended on continuous electrical supply and quantum key generation systems that were extraordinarily sophisticated but also vulnerable to one critical weakness: power surges. Dr. Klaus's warning from the installation day echoed in Isaiah's memory. Power surges can corrupt electronic components. He flipped to the mechanical override specifications. This was different. Completely analog, no electronics, just precision engineering. Gears, pressure points, torque measurements, and sequential lock mechanisms that required exact mathematical calculations to manipulate. The manufacturer had included the backup system for exactly this scenario. If the quantum encryption failed, if the biometric locks malfunctioned, if the power corrupted the sophisticated electronics, there was a way in. Isaiah spent the next 2 days reverse engineering the mechanical system. He watched YouTube tutorials on advanced mechanical engineering at the library computers. He filled 3 notebooks with calculations, gear ratio analyses, torque specifications, pressure point sequences. He mapped out the exact manipulation required. 12 specific pressure points applied in precise order, each requiring calculated force based on the gear mechanisms inside. On the 3rd day, exhausted and running on nothing but determination and the cheap instant coffee his father kept for emergencies, Isaiah had it. A complete sequence. A mathematical solution to what Ashford believed was an unsolvable problem. But knowing the theory wasn't enough. Isaiah needed to practice. Using cardboard from cereal boxes, rubber bands, and basic materials from the dollar store, he built a crude model of the safe's mechanical override system. It was nowhere near as sophisticated as the real thing, but it allowed him to practice the hand movements, the pressure sequences, the timing. He set up in their apartment's tiny living room, the model safe propped against the wall, a stopwatch borrowed from his school gym class sitting on the floor beside him. First attempt, 43 seconds. His hands fumbled on the 6th pressure point, lost the sequence, had to start over. Second attempt, 38 seconds. Better, but still too slow. His fingers weren't applying consistent pressure. Third attempt, 31 seconds. The sequence flowed more naturally now, his photographic memory guiding his hands through the pattern. Fourth attempt, 27 seconds. Almost there. His movements becoming automatic, muscle memory combining with mathematical precision. Fifth attempt, 25 seconds. Perfect. Isaiah sat back against the wall, breathing hard, his hands aching from the repetitive movements. But he'd done it. He could open Ashford's impenetrable safe in 25 seconds using nothing but mathematical genius and reverse-engineered specifications that had been thrown away like garbage. He just needed one thing: an opportunity. The opportunity came 6 days later, delivered by nature itself. A massive thunderstorm rolled across the city at 2:37 a.m. on a Tuesday. Isaiah woke to the sound of thunder that rattled their apartment windows and lightning that turned the night sky purple-white. At Ashford Tower, 40 floors above the street, the storm hit like a physical force. Lightning struck the building's transformer with 200 million volts of electricity. For exactly 3 seconds, the tower's power fluctuated wildly before backup generators engaged and restored stability. 3 seconds. In that 3-second window, the safe's quantum encryption system experienced a catastrophic power surge. The sophisticated electronics that generated quantum keys and managed biometric authentication protocols encountered voltage spikes far beyond their design specifications. The quantum key generation system corrupted. The biometric locks froze in a security failsafe mode. The backup generators restored power, but the damage was done. When Thornton Ashford arrived at his office 8 hours later and approached the safe to retrieve critical documents for a $600 million acquisition deal, he discovered that his $450,000 fortress had become his prison. The retinal scanner didn't recognize him. The fingerprint reader showed error messages. The voice recognition system remained completely unresponsive. The quantum encryption that was supposed to be unbreakable had broken itself. And the only way to open the safe now was through the mechanical override system, the backup that Ashford had dismissed as unnecessary. The system whose complete specifications he'd thrown into the recycling bin 3 weeks ago. The system that only one person in the entire world had studied, reverse engineered, and practiced. A 12-year-old boy who Ashford had taught to be invisible. Isaiah didn't know about the power surge yet. Didn't know that Ashford's empire was beginning to crumble. Didn't know that in 7 days, he would get his moment. But the technical specifications sat hidden under his bed, covered in his handwritten calculations. The sequence was burned into his photographic memory. His hands knew the exact pressure points, the precise timing, the mathematical solution to an impossible problem. And when his moment came, when Ashford stood desperate and drunk in front of 15 witnesses offering $250 million to anyone who could crack his safe, Isaiah would step forward from his corner. And in 25 seconds, he would prove that genius doesn't need credentials or corner offices. Sometimes it just needs someone powerful enough to carelessly throw away the wrong piece of paper. Day 1. Thornton Ashford arrived at his office at 7:13 a.m., earlier than usual, carrying the confidence of a man who controlled everything. The acquisition team from California was scheduled to arrive at 9 a.m. 6 lawyers for executives and a CEO who'd flown across the country specifically to finalize the $600 million deal. Ashford needed documents from his safe, cryptocurrency encryption keys, offshore account access codes, and corporate files that prove his company's valuation claims. He approached the quantum-encrypted fortress with the casual certainty of someone who'd opened it hundreds of times. Leaned close to the retinal scanner. The blue light activated, then flickered. Biometric authentication error flashed across the digital display. Ashford stepped back, confused. Tried again. The fingerprint reader glowed, scanned his thumb, then displayed the same error message. Voice recognition remained completely unresponsive. His heart began to race. By 8:47 a.m., with the California team en route from the airport, Ashford was on the phone with Quantum Secure GmbH in Munich. "The biometric system isn't recognizing me," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "I need remote access, an override code, something." "Mr. Ashford," the technician replied in accented English, "there is no remote access. You specifically demanded we destroy all backup protocols. The contract you signed waived all manufacturer support for lock recovery. There has to be something." "The mechanical override system," the technician interrupted. "The backup analog mechanism we installed. The specifications were in the documentation we provided." The documentation Ashford had thrown into recycling 3 weeks ago. "Walk me through it," Ashford demanded. "I cannot," the technician said. "We destroyed those records per your contract. The mechanical system requires precise calculations based on the specific configuration of your unit. Without the specifications, it would take weeks to reverse engineer." Ashford ended the call and threw his phone across the conference room. At 9 a.m., the California team arrived to find Ashford making excuses about temporary technical difficulties. By noon, after 4 hours of delays and increasingly transparent lies, they left. By 3 p.m., Ashford received the email he'd been dreading. The acquisition deal was off. $600 million gone. Days 2 through 4. The specialists arrived in waves. Day 2 brought 3 experts from a New York security firm, carrying equipment cases that cost more than luxury cars. They set up thermal imaging cameras to detect internal mechanisms, electromagnetic scanners to map circuitry, acoustic sensors to listen for tumbler movements. Isaiah watched from his corner, calculus homework spread across his lap, while his father emptied trash bins around the conference room. The experts worked with focused intensity, confident in their technology and experience. By evening, they'd failed completely. The quantum encryption is intact but non-functional, the lead specialist explained to Ashford. Power surge damage, most likely. The biometric systems are locked in fail-safe mode. Without manufacturer specifications for the mechanical override, this could take months. Day 3 brought more specialists, more equipment, more sophisticated approaches. Manipulation techniques that involved feeling microscopic movements in the dial. Probability algorithms run on laptops, displaying cascading code. Drilling proposals that would take weeks and risk destroying everything inside. Nothing worked. That afternoon, Ashford's assistant interrupted the specialist with news that made his face go pale. Shareholders were demanding an emergency board meeting. The collapsed acquisition had triggered questions about company leadership. Stock prices had dropped 12% in 2 days. Day 4 brought the final blow. The acquisition team filed a lawsuit for breach of contract. Major investors began calling for Ashford's resignation. Business partners who'd been negotiating deals quietly withdrew. And Ashford's lead attorney delivered the worst news. Federal regulators were requesting documents for an audit, documents locked inside the safe. Isaiah sat against the wall, watching another team of experts pack up their failed equipment. He'd practiced the mechanical override sequence so many times his hands could do it in his sleep. 25 seconds. That's all it would take. But he remained invisible. Days 5 and 6. Ashford stopped showing up sober. Day 5, he arrived at 11 a.m. reeking of whiskey, his expensive suit rumpled, his eyes red-rimmed and wild. Another team of specialists worked methodically, but Ashford just sat at the conference table, drinking from a crystal tumbler and staring at the safe with something close to hatred. $450,000, he muttered to no one in particular. The best security money can buy, and it's locked me out of my own fortune. His assistant fielded an endless stream of calls. Federal regulators demanding documents. Board members requesting emergency meetings. Lawyers warning about mounting legal exposure. Isaiah watched his father clean the conference room windows while Ashford spiraled. Terrence moved with careful invisibility, avoiding eye contact, becoming part of the furniture. But Isaiah's photographic memory recorded everything. Ashford's deterioration, the specialist's failures, the mounting desperation. Day 6 brought a new horror. The stock price had dropped 23% from its pre-crisis high. 3 board members publicly called for Ashford's removal. The company's CFO resigned, citing irreconcilable differences with leadership. And still, nobody could open the safe. The Day 6 specialists were different, older, more experienced, with reputations built on cracking impossible security systems. They worked in silence, using techniques Isaiah recognized from his research: pressure manipulation, sequential testing, systematic elimination. By 8 p.m., they admitted defeat. Without the manufacturer specifications for the mechanical override, this is essentially impossible, the lead specialist told Ashford. The quantum encryption system would take a quantum computer years to crack. The mechanical backup requires precise knowledge of internal configurations that no longer exist. I'm sorry, Mr. Ashford. You built the perfect prison. Day 7. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 4 p.m. 15 people filled the conference room by 4:17 p.m. Board members, lawyers, the company's lead attorney, security specialists who'd failed all week, executives whose careers were tied to Ashford's sinking ship. And in the corner, barely visible among the cleaning supplies, sat Isaiah Fletcher. Red hoodie, blue backpack, Calculus homework spread across his lap. He'd been there all day while his father worked, watching the final team of specialists pack up their equipment in defeat. The technical specifications were memorized in his photographic memory. The 25-second sequence was burned into his muscle memory. But he remained invisible. Ashford stood at the head of the conference table, disheveled and drunk, facing the assembled witnesses to his empire's collapse. The quantum-encrypted safe towered behind him, its brushed titanium surface catching the late afternoon light, a $450,000 monument to his paranoia and his downfall. The lead board member, Patricia Thornwell, spoke with barely controlled anger. "Thornton, we need those documents. The federal audit, the shareholder lawsuits, the acquisition litigation. Everything requires access to files that are locked in that safe. If we can't produce them within 48 hours, the company faces regulatory action that could destroy us." Ashford poured himself another whiskey with shaking hands. "I've had 7 teams of experts work on this. The best security specialists in the world. Nobody can crack it." "Then we're finished," Patricia said flatly. The room fell silent. 15 powerful people contemplating the collapse of a $3.2 billion empire because its paranoid CEO had locked himself out of his own safe. Ashford drained his glass in one swallow. Alcohol and panic and 7 days of failure finally broke something inside him. $250 million, he announced, his voice loud enough to carry through the entire room. "To anyone who can crack this safe." The specialist stopped packing. Board members turned to stare. His lead attorney immediately began documenting the statement on company letterhead, witnessed by 15 corporate officers who could testify it was legally binding. And against the back wall, Isaiah Fletcher looked up from his homework. His heart pounded. His hands trembled slightly. For 7 days, he'd watched experts fail at the problem he'd solved. For 7 days, he'd remained invisible, following his father's lessons about survival. But $250 million could change everything. It could pay for his education, his father's retirement, a future beyond poverty and invisibility. It could prove that genius didn't need credentials or corner offices. It could show Ashford and every person in this room who'd looked through him like he didn't exist that they were wrong. Isaiah's moment had arrived. Isaiah stood. His backpack slid off his shoulder and hit the floor with a soft thud that seemed impossibly loud in the silent conference room. 15 pairs of eyes turned toward him. Board members in custom suits, lawyers with briefcases, security specialists who'd failed for 7 days, and Thornton Ashford himself, drunk and desperate at the head of the table. "Excuse me, Mr. Ashford," Isaiah said, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through him. "I can open it." The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. 15 powerful people stared at the 12-year-old black boy in the red hoodie and worn sneakers, standing among cleaning supplies in the corner where invisible people belonged. Ashford's face cycled through shock, recognition, and something far darker. He set down his whiskey glass with exaggerated care, his movements deliberate and theatrical. "This is what we've come to," he said, his voice dripping with mockery loud enough for everyone to hear. Janitor genetics, trying to solve problems that the world's best security experts couldn't crack. Nervous laughter rippled through some of the board members. But Patricia Thornwell, the chief legal officer, didn't laugh. Neither did several others whose phones were already recording. "Let me get this straight," Ashford continued, standing now, playing to his audience. 7 days of specialists with advanced degrees and decades of experience have failed. But you, he gestured dismissively at Isaiah, think you can just walk up to a $450,000 quantum-encrypted safe and open it? "Yes, sir," Isaiah said quietly. Ashford laughed, the sound harsh and cruel. "This is perfect. This is exactly perfect." He turned to his board members. "Let's watch this be a learning moment about knowing your place. Come on, kid. Show us what Janitor's son brilliance looks like." More phones came out. 7 different people began recording from multiple angles. Isaiah walked toward the safe, his heart pounding so hard he thought everyone could hear it. He passed the conference table where Ashford stood smirking, past the failed specialists watching with pity and embarrassment, past Patricia Thornwell, whose expression had shifted to something unreadable. He reached the massive quantum-encrypted fortress that had defeated the best minds money could hire. The room fell completely silent. Isaiah took a breath. In his mind, the technical specifications appeared with perfect photographic clarity. Every diagram, every measurement, every calculation he'd spent 47 hours mastering. His hands knew the sequence from hundreds of practice runs on his cardboard model. 25 seconds. That's all he needed. He began. First, he pressed his fingers against the seemingly smooth surface beside the digital keypad, finding the hidden seam invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly where to look. The mechanical override panel, disguised, unmarked, designed to be accessed only by someone with complete manufacturer specifications. It popped open with a soft click. Behind him, someone gasped. Inside the panel, 12 pressure points arranged in a precise geometric pattern. Isaiah's photographic memory overlaid the diagram onto reality, showing him exactly where each point corresponded to internal gears, exactly how much torque each required. He pressed the first point. Upper left corner, 47 newtons of force, held for exactly 1.3 seconds. A subtle mechanical vibration responded through his fingertips. Second point, lower right, 63 newtons, 0.8 seconds. The gear system inside began to disengage in sequence, each pressure point unlocking the next stage. Third point, fourth, fifth. Isaiah's hands moved with mathematical precision. Every calculation he'd made from the discarded specifications translated into physical action. Pressure converted to torque, torque rotating gears, gears disengaging locks that 7 days of experts hadn't known existed. 10 seconds. 6 point. Seventh. The mechanical override system was responding exactly as the mathematics predicted. 15 seconds. Behind him, the conference room remained frozen. 15 witnesses watching a 12-year-old do the impossible. 8 point, 9 point, 10th. Isaiah's fingers moved faster now, the sequence flowing from memory into motion. The quantum encryption remained corrupted and useless, but the analog backup system, the one Ashford had dismissed as unnecessary, was unlocking beneath his hands. 20 seconds. 11th point, the hardest one, requiring 89 newtons at a precise angle. Isaiah's hand trembled slightly, but his mind guided him through the calculation. The gear clicked into position. 23 seconds. Final point, the master release that would disengage every hydraulic lock simultaneously. Isaiah pressed with exactly 72 newtons of force, held for 2.1 seconds while the internal mechanism completed its sequence. 25 seconds. A decisive click resonated through the conference room, deeper and more final than any sound that had come before. Multiple hydraulic locks disengaged in perfect synchronization. The massive titanium door, which had remained sealed for 7 days despite every expert attempt, swung open smoothly. The impossible had just become possible. In 25 seconds, inside the safe, reality became evidence. Stacks of documents filled the climate-controlled interior. USB drives labeled with cryptocurrency wallet addresses. Bearer bonds and denominations that made Isaiah's breath catch. Leather portfolios stamped confidential and attorney-client privilege. But what caught Patricia Thornwell's attention were the documents visible at eye level. Corporate files labeled Insider Trading Network, Confidential, and Federal Official Payoffs, Destroy after 2025. She pulled out her phone and started photographing. "Patricia, don't you dare," Ashford began. But others were already doing the same. 3 board members, 2 lawyers, even one of the failed security specialists. Phones captured image after image, evidence of massive fraud, bribery, systematic corporate espionage. Cryptocurrency keys worth $600 million. Offshore account codes that proved tax evasion. Documents that would trigger federal investigations lasting years. The safe that was supposed to protect Ashford's secrets had just exposed them all. Ashford lunged. He moved with shocking speed for a drunk man, crossing the conference table in 2 steps and grabbing Isaiah by his red hoodie. He violently shook the boy, Isaiah's feet lifting off the ground, his head snapping back. "You little thief!" Ashford screamed, spittle flying. "You stole my combination. You broke into my safe." The racist slurs poured out then, words so vicious that several board members visibly recoiled. Every buried bigotry, every casual contempt, every degrading comment Isaiah had endured for 3 weeks came flooding out in one explosive tirade. 7 phones captured every second. "Dad!" Isaiah cried out. Terrence Fletcher burst through the conference room door, having heard his son's voice. He rushed toward Ashford, grabbing the billionaire's arms. "Let go of my son!" Terrence shouted. Ashford shoved Terrence backward with shocking force. "You're fired," he screamed at Terrence. "Both of you, out of this building. I'll destroy you. I'll have you arrested for theft, corporate espionage, breaking and entering." He opened it in front of 15 witnesses. Patricia Thornwell said coldly, her phone still recording. "Your $250 million offer was documented on company letterhead. This is assault of a minor on camera." But Ashford was beyond reason. Years of arrogance, 7 days of failure, and the humiliation of being outsmarted by a child he deemed worthless had shattered something fundamental. Security arrived, drawn by the shouting. Board members were calling 911. The security specialist stood frozen, watching a billionaire's complete psychological breakdown in real time. Isaiah, still in his father's arms, stared at the open safe, at the evidence now photographed from multiple angles, at the $250 million offer documented and witnessed, at the empire beginning to crumble in real time. 25 seconds had changed everything. The child dismissed as invisible had just become the most important person in the room. And every moment of what came next was being recorded for the world to see. Patricia Thornwell sat in her car in the Ashford Tower parking garage at 8:34 p.m., hands trembling as she held her phone. The video was 2 minutes and 17 seconds long. It showed everything. Isaiah opening the safe in 25 seconds, Ashford's violent assault, the racist slurs, Terrence protecting his son, the billionaire's complete breakdown. 7 different angles have been captured, but Patricia's was the clearest. She opened Twitter, typed the caption with shaking fingers. A 12-year-old black child just solved a problem that stumped experts for 7 days. The billionaire who offered $250 million then assaulted him on camera. This is Thornton Ashford's empire. #PayIsaiah. She pressed upload at 8:34 p.m. Within 17 minutes, the video had 50,000 views. By 9 p.m., it had been shared 12,000 times. By midnight, 6 more angles appeared across TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, each one showing the same devastating truth from different perspectives. The hashtag #PayIsaiah began trending at 11:47 p.m. By dawn, 47 million people had watched a billionaire attack child. News networks led their morning broadcasts with the story. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all showing the footage of Isaiah's 25-second miracle followed by Ashford's violent response. Legal analysts dissected the binding $250 million offer documented on company letterhead. Child protection advocates called for criminal charges. But what transformed the story from viral moment to movement was what happened next. Thousands of Ashford's former employees began sharing their own stories. The hashtag #AshfordTruth emerged at 10:23 a.m. By noon, it had 340,000 posts. Stories of systematic discrimination. Racist comments documented in emails. Wage theft affecting primarily workers of color. Sexual harassment complaints ignored by HR. Retaliation against whistleblowers. The digital avalanche had begun. The emergency board meeting convened at 2 p.m. the day after the assault. 11 board members voted to terminate Thornton Ashford immediately. The 12th, Ashford's cousin who'd been installed as a favor, abstained. Patricia Thornwell, as chief legal officer, presented the motion. Mr. Ashford has exposed this company to catastrophic legal liability. He assaulted a minor on camera. He refused to honor a witnessed $250 million contractual offer. and the evidence photograph from his safe reveals systematic criminal activity that will trigger federal investigations. The vote took 6 minutes. Ashford was out. By 4 p.m., federal agencies had announced their investigations. The FBI focused on the insider trading network. The SEC examined securities fraud. The IRS launched an audit of offshore holdings. At 6:17 p.m., armed agents executed search warrants at Ashford Tower. The documents photographed from the safe provided roadmaps for what to seize. Over the following weeks, 89 former employees submitted sworn affidavits documenting Ashford's decade-long pattern of racial discrimination, wage theft, and workplace abuse. Each affidavit referenced the viral video as inspiration to finally come forward. The empire built on arrogance and contempt was collapsing in real time. The trial lasted 9 months. Federal prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence across 37 counts. The insider trading network involving 340 investors and 16 corporate acquisitions. The $2.1 billion cryptocurrency fraud scheme. Bribery of 3 federal officials documented in handwritten notes. Systematic civil rights violations affecting 89 employees. The documents from Ashford's safe provided the smoking gun for nearly every charge. USB drives contained encrypted communications proving coordination. Bearer bonds traced back to illegal offshore accounts. Files marked destroy after 2025 showed consciousness of guilt. But the prosecution's most powerful moment came when they played the assault video for the jury. Not just the violence, but Ashford's words, the racist slurs, the contempt, the assumption that a black child couldn't possibly possess genius. "This is who Thornton Ashford is," the lead prosecutor said. "A man who believes his wealth places him above the law and above basic human decency. A man who, when confronted with brilliance that didn't match his prejudices, responded with violence." Isaiah testified for 2 hours. He explained finding the technical specifications in recycling, described teaching himself quantum encryption theory and mechanical engineering, demonstrated the mathematical calculations required for the override sequence. The jury watched a 12-year-old explain concepts that most of them couldn't comprehend. Ashford's defense argued he'd been under extreme stress, that the assault was a momentary lapse. But the 89 employee affidavits proved a pattern spanning years. The financial crimes spoke for themselves. The jury deliberated for 4 days. Judge Catherine Morrison delivered the verdict on November 3rd at 10:15 a.m. The courtroom was packed. Media, former employees, advocacy groups, and in the front row, Isaiah and Terrence Fletcher. Isaiah wore his red hoodie. Terrence held his son's hand. Ashford stood as the judge entered, his expensive suit no longer hiding how much he'd diminished. 9 months of trial had aged him visibly. "Mr. Ashford," Judge Morrison began, her voice carrying the weight of justice. "On 37 federal counts, including securities fraud, insider trading, money laundering, bribery of federal officials, conspiracy to commit tax fraud, assault of a minor, and systematic civil rights violations." The courtroom held its breath. "Guilty on all charges." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Several former employees began crying. Judge Morrison continued, "Your crimes represent a decade-long pattern of believing yourself above the law. Your assault on a child demonstrated a contempt for human dignity that this court finds particularly egregious. Your systematic discrimination violated the civil rights of 89 employees." The sentence of this court is as follows: 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. $250 million to be paid to Isaiah Fletcher per the witness contractual offer you made and subsequently violated. $75 million in punitive damages to be distributed among the 89 employees who suffered under your discrimination. Permanent forfeiture of all corporate positions and prohibition from serving as an officer or director of any public company. All offshore holdings and cryptocurrency assets to be seized and liquidated. Bailiffs moved toward Ashford, who stood frozen in disbelief. As they led him away in handcuffs, he passed the Fletcher family. Isaiah met his eyes, not with triumph, but with something that looked like sadness. Understanding that empires built on contempt eventually consume themselves. 18 months later, the Fletcher Institute for STEM Education opened its doors. The first-year budget was $50 million, carefully invested, responsibly managed by advisors who believed in the mission. 500 full scholarships for underserved students across 12 states. Advanced mathematics programs, science laboratories, engineering workshops, coding boot camps. Isaiah stood at the opening ceremony, now 14, wearing his red hoodie proudly. In his hand, the acceptance letter from MIT's Advanced Mathematics program. Full scholarships starting next fall. Beside him, Terrence watched his son address the crowd. No longer a janitor cleaning other people's offices, but executive director of a foundation changing thousands of lives. Genius doesn't arrive with credentials, Isaiah said, his voice steady and clear. It doesn't need corner offices or expensive degrees. Sometimes genius sits in corners, doing homework, watching and learning while the world overlooks it. The audience, scholarship recipients, their families, former Ashford employees who'd received their settlements, listened with tears streaming. My father taught me to be invisible to survive, Isaiah continued. But invisibility taught me to see everything, to notice patterns that powerful people miss, to understand that the people dismissed as furniture often know more than those in charge. He held up his MIT letter. This institute exists because one man threw away the wrong piece of paper, because he assumed the help couldn't possibly understand quantum encryption, because his contempt blinded him to genius that was right in front of him. So to every student here today, Isaiah said, his voice rising, every kid told they're not good enough, every person dismissed because of where they're from or what they look like, you are seen. Your brilliance matters. And when you get your 25 seconds, don't just crack the safe. Shatter the empire. Sometimes genius doesn't arrive in corner offices with degrees and pedigrees. Sometimes it sits in the corner in a red hoodie, doing calculus homework, waiting for the world to notice. And when that genius gets its 25 seconds, empires built on contempt don't just crack. They shatter completely. This story hit different, didn't it? Isaiah's 25-second moment reminds us that genius doesn't wait for permission. It just needs one chance to shine. And sometimes, the people society teaches us to overlook are the exact ones who change everything. Now, I need to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, what was your favorite part of this story? Was it the moment Isaiah stood up to speak? The 25-second sequence that left experts speechless? The viral reckoning that brought Ashford down? Or Isaiah's speech at the Institute opening? Let me know in the comments. Your answer might inspire the next story I tell.